Okay, everybody, here we are. It's lunch therapy interview Friday already. Come on, let's go. Let's do this thing. Yes, it is interview Friday. I have my Spawn Till You Die shirt on. We've got Foop and Poof here because it's very intrinsic to the show today, which is an interview with Ray DeLaurentis, who worked for a long while on the Fairly OddParents. But right now we're going to take in a breath. We're going to take in 3 breaths even. Here we go. First one. Hold it. Let it out. Yes, this is important. Yes. We're going to take in another deep breath. Hold it. We're going to let it out. We're going to take in another deep breath. Foop and Poof included. Take it in and let it out. Yes, the Spawn Till You Die shirt is an Alaska thing. Ray Troll, fantastic artist, does these shirts. I was able to get one recently. I've got the headphones on, so that means we're going to dive into Interview Friday. Looking forward to it because Ray DeLaurentis is a font of creativity and a font of information, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. And here he is. Here we are today. We're lucky enough to be sitting here with Ray DeLaurentis, who is a writer and a creative person who has been working his entire life writing for television and for movies. And we're going to pick his brain here and learn some stuff. Hey, Ray, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. So nice to have you here. So, yes. So I wanted to find out, like, where are you from and how did you get into this business? Are you from Los Angeles or did you come from someplace else?
Okay, well, I grew up in southern New Jersey, on the beach, basically. The beach where it snows in the winter. And so yeah, I basically I came to what I do now, or I've been doing for many years, through kind of a circuitous route. I started off in school in Washington, D.C., where I thought I was going to study to become a trial lawyer. Spent about a half an hour in a law school class and literally found myself running across the campus. So what happened was I found myself halfway through undergraduate school, and I started making choices at that time, basically based on lifestyle. So I love New York City, always was a Knicks and a Mets fan, and I love the city. So I basically went to NYU Film School to be in New York. So I went to film school, and when I went at the time, it was really like an art school. I mean, it was only NYU and USC were the only 2 schools in the country that actually made movies in school. It was like the golden age of dinosaurs for film schools. And so it's so long ago. And so I went and I made some movies. And what happened, cut me off at any point if I'm giving you too much information.
No, this is great. It's always good.
You're basically, if you're going to make a film as a senior at NYU undergrad, you have to write a script and it has to be approved because only like 1 out of 5 people get to make a movie. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. I'll write a script. So I wrote a script and it was apparently, according to my professors and everyone else, way, way better than the other scripts. But I think the reason is because the other scripts were so horrendously bad.
Well, I find, I don't know about you, but I find when I've ever been in, theater school or film school, a lot of times the scripts in school are just weird. Like they're very like avant-garde, or they don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
And I don't know what that is. I don't know whether people are just trying to, like, right off the bat, just trying to be different, or whether we haven't learned the structure of things yet.
Well, I think that what at NYU, the deal at NYU was that it was film students were sort of they were sort of ahead of their time in that they were obsessed with themselves, and so all these movies were these ridiculous, personal, pretentious movies about their own deep feelings, which weren't universal in any way. And so at any rate, once I actually got my script approved, I didn't really care about directing it or anything. I just thought, well, at least I can compete with these people who are sort of in a higher end in terms of an elite group of people who want to do this. So I worked on a movie in New York as a PA, and I ended up coming out to Los Angeles, and I took a job on St. Elsewhere as a production assistant, which is an ancient
one of my favorite shows.
And so I came out, and what happened was, long story short, I thought, well, I don't want to be a production assistant, and it looked like writing was a way to get into the business. Once again, pure lifestyle choice. Wanted to live in California, didn't want to go work at a company, didn't want to go stand around a water cooler and talk about something boring all day. So I wanted to do something fun, and this seemed fun. So I talked to the producer, the executive producer, Bruce Paltrow, who was a super powerful, big-time producer back in the days. And I said to him, how do I get a chance to write a script? And so he said to me, write down these 2 scenes, come back tomorrow and give me the 2 scenes written, leave them on my desk, I'll talk to you at lunch. Really? So I said, okay. So everyone said I was crazy because I didn't have a writing sample and I wasn't a writer's assistant. But I said, well, I don't really care. I mean, to step back, I never really cared about the entertainment business in terms of what anyone thought of me or if I'd ever be successful in it, because I didn't have a great deal of respect for the business. I just like being creative. So at any rate, I wrote 2 scenes and left them on his desk. I came in at lunchtime, and he was sitting in this giant office at MTM, Mary Tyler Moore Studios, at the back of the room. And next to his desk was a stuffed dog named Stay. That was a stuffed collie that was Lassie's stand-in.
No way.
So I'm sitting there with this mammoth man glaring at me with his stuffed dog next to him. And he picks up one of the scenes and he says, Raymond, this scene here is perhaps one of the worst written scenes I have ever read in my life. And he threw it over my head into the hallway. And I started to laugh. And I said, well, listen, thanks very much for taking the time to read the material anyway. And he laughed back and he said, okay, basically you have the balls to do this. You weren't broken by the fact that I told you the scene sucked. He said, it wasn't that bad. He said, the other scene's very, very good. And perhaps you can, write a script with somebody. So
do you think the reason that you didn't take it personally is because you came at this business not from I've got to do it kind of standpoint, that you came as like more of a practical kind of thing?
Well, I came to it because I mean, honestly, I have a love of being creative. I have a love of being a free spirit.
That's cool.
And those aspects of it I did love, and I really did like writing. I thought it was fun. But I think it's because I never really, I mean, listen, I don't ever want to offend anybody. And if I do something that upsets someone, I'm completely accountable to that always. Yeah. But in terms of random people having an opinion about me, I kind of know I'm a really good person. And my feeling is I just don't have that big of an ego. So ironically, not having that big of an ego helps you sort of absorb things like that. My feeling at the time was, well, this is the first thing I've written since film school, and I can only get better if I want to do it. So it's like, what's the big deal? It's just like be in the moment, be in the day, and see where you go. So what happened was, really long story short, I did that and I started doing work. I didn't want to be in hour television because I didn't like the lifestyle. It was, you never saw anybody. You were alone for weeks on end writing scripts. I did some feature work with my brother, who's older and a very successful writer, and he asked me to work with him because he was impressed with my work, I guess, and he loves me. So we did a bunch of stuff together. We wrote movies together. Didn't really like the movie lifestyle because it took too long, and you were disconnected from everything for 6 months. And by the time you wrote the script, the people who hired you were all fired or in a new company. And so during that time, I wrote a kids and family pilot, which made me laugh. And I liked the state of mind I was in writing it. It was sort of goofy but smart, and I enjoyed it. And people really loved it. There was no really kids and family business at the time. So, I mean, cartoons were just an advertisement for products, and there was no live action kids television, which for the most part, from a writing standpoint, is truly horrendous anyway. So I ended up going back and doing things, and I started going and doing a lot of development for people because there was a lot of development at the time and people liked my work. So like one year I developed 12 shows the year our daughter Olivia was born. And at the time, the animation business started opening up again. And I had some fans. And I just did the same thing I did initially. I came in and said, what do I need to do to get a show? And I wrote some stuff, and Warner Brothers Animation. Well, first of all, I guess it was what used to be Fox Family / Saban, but it was really Fox Family, asked me to write something up for a screensaver of a dog that they wanted to turn into a kid's animated show. So I wrote 4 pages up, and they sold 80 episodes of it off it.
They made a show off of a screensaver dog?
Yeah, I made an animated show off a screensaver. I wrote another animated pilot from a video game character. I've written movies from books. I wrote an animated movie, or at least the first draft of one, from a comic book. I've kind of done every form of translation there is to do. I worked in the game business for kids for a long time. I worked at Henson Interactive and Disney Interactive. So I took a lot of their classic characters and wrote them into games. I've done a ton of interactive work. And so I kind of done everything. And at any rate, they sold 80 episodes off it, and it made them a lot of money, because I think they probably robbed the companies they were working with, Clinton Classic, Saban style. And so it got me an overall deal at that company. And I remember making them put the money in escrow so they couldn't steal it from me. And then I did that. And then it basically was just a springboard to going to other animation companies and other places, because I always went back and forth between live action and animation and kids and family stuff, and just creating shows, running shows, some of which never saw the light of day, a bunch of which did. I think at this point I have run or produced / story edited. In the animation business, story editing is sort of the head writer. I guess 13 or 14 animated shows, and I've developed, God knows how many. It's almost a joke at this point how many I've developed for people. And so currently, what I'm doing is I'm working on a couple of movies with a writing partner, a super talented guy I've been friends with for years. We're writing the third draft of the Night at the Museum franchise.
Yeah.
We just turned that into an animated movie for Disney Plus, and then we're rewriting a version, another rendition of the Ice Age franchise for them. And then I'm also developing, more or less finished developing the first round of an animated show about endangered animals, which is surprisingly kind of funny. It's about a group of really super weirdo endangered animals, like the oddball ones. Nobody
sounds like fun.
And they come to the big city to make it, and they're super weirdos. It's called On the Edge. And if you want to direct your viewers to something important, you can direct them to a woman named Beth Blood, who runs a thing called the Edge Project. Mm-hmm. And she's put millions of dollars with her husband into protecting biodiversity. And awesome philanthropic woman who does these things. And so I went to Miami a few weeks ago, and we sold it to, a month ago or 2 months ago now, we sold it to the Discovery Channel. Of course, then this whole crazy nightmare of COVID hit. So it's now,
but isn't animation kind of like the thing now, though? Isn't that one of the things?
Well, the thing is, animation is the thing now, because no one can make live action, right? So it is for me. I started doing animation. It's funny about lifestyle choices. I remember this room used to be my office, and it became my son's room before he moved on to Chicago to live a much cooler life. And
he's a musician, right? Yeah.
What?
He's a musician.
Yeah, he's an awesome kid. He's still in undergraduate school, but he's in a professional orchestra already, and he writes his own music, and he's in a band. He's just a great, great kid. So at any rate, what happened was, when he was born, Olivia was too smart to play sports, so she wasn't interested. But I live in this really, really uptight little red state called Westlake Village, and the dads were pretty insane about sports, and I was like a pretty serious athlete, but I'm like, really a good sport, and it's all about what you learn through sports, so forth and so on. So I couldn't really leave my son alone with these dads because he wanted to play sports. So I started running animated shows, because at the time I could run them out of my bedroom office. So once again, it was a lifestyle choice, and I did that for years. So I coached I coached 3 teams a year for 8 years. Plus, I was an Indian guides chief and an Indian princess chief for the YMCA.
Really?
For those things. And I basically, my life's about my kids and my family. And so I basically curtailed my whole business to be a dad, and to be a husband. And then the only time I ever had to go to an office was when I started working at Nickelodeon, because when I ran the Fairly OddParents and T.U.F.F. and other shows for them, Nick is a big time company, so they have staffs. So I had a staff of up to 8 people, you know, so I had going to the office a lot of days there. But prior to that, you know, I was just freewheeling. Like I'd surf all day on Wednesday, then, you know, work on days when people were surfing, you know, and I just
like the ultimate flexible job. Doesn't seem like it would be, but it is. Now I want to ask you,
can make it that.
Okay. So my question is, you kind of hit this industry running, like you hit the ground running. You just like, hey, here's a scene.
Right.
Yeah. You went to film school.
Yeah, it was useless.
It sounds like you learned on the job.
Yes.
How did you learn about structure? Is all this stuff kind of built in when you go in to start writing? Do people say this is the way it has to go? How did you learn this stuff on the job?
Well, that's a huge conversation. We should probably do interview part 2 on actual writing.
But I would love to hear a little nuts and bolts about that, about like structure,
okay,
how
so
you structure things.
What happened was, I think I just learned by watching so much, you know. I just watched television, but I loved movies. I really loved movies, especially. Yeah. And so what happened was, you know, I think I just got an inherent sense, an instinctive sense of how scenes worked. And then when I first started working, I started reading scripts. So, you know, you read a script, you see how a scene works, you see how there's you know, how exposition works, which is one of the hardest things about writing. And you sort of learn, you know, I love to learn things. Like when I was in college, I took something like 15 different course settings. I studied anthropology, psychology, sociology, urban geography, you know, literally everything, philosophy. I was a speech major. I did everything. I love learning things. I love breaking things down. It fascinates me. So I started looking at things and I said, okay, so what's going on in the scene? There's what do you have to pay attention to? There's pace, there's character, there's story, there's tone, you know, at the very least, right? Yeah. And so, you know, at first it had to be in my head. I had to write all that down and kind of go through and go, is this in the right tone? Is the character, what's happening with the character? Is the story moving forward? You know, is the pace moving forward? Is there a setup and a scene below? Then there's the subtle art of exposition. How am I getting information out? So
exposition, just to explain to some people that might not know, exposition is basically you're telling people the information they need to know about the story, about the world.
That's right.
Story. And a lot of times, especially like in the pilot, it's kind of difficult to do because you got to explain all the different characters, their relationship, and you got to get the thing that kind of hooks them to move forward with it. Yeah. That's
right. And that's why some forms of television are so easy to write, like procedurals, right? Anybody, I'm telling you, you can take anyone in your audience right now, anyone, and you could give them a few months. And if they had an agent, they could write a procedural. Because all they do in a procedural is they basically say, here's what happened, here's the crime scene, here's what we think, here's what we're going to do. And there's no other form of writing you can do that in, right?
Isn't there kind of a middle part where it's like, everybody thinks it's one person and then it's the other person or something?
Yeah, well, that's a red herring. That's a red herring. And that takes some abilities.
Style.
The first part, exposition is one of the hardest parts of writing, and not making it on the nose is tricky. So at any rate, yeah, so I just figured it out and then I just worked at it, you know? And, you know, I'm an intense person and I have high standards for myself. Yeah. So, you know, I was just telling a kid, I gave some notes on a pilot he wrote the other day. I told him that when I wrote pilots, and I wrote a bunch of them, I would sometimes take 3 days to write the first 2 sentences of a pilot, because my point of view was the first sentence the main character spoke, and the response to that and his reaction to it had to set up exactly the character, where he was at, and the world he lived in, and the tone of the world. And so, you know, that's not easy to do, but you know, writing is hard, but there is craft. And I know a lot of writers who have literally no creative talent, none, who got very rich because they have an amazing craft, you know, they're model builders, they put things together. And a lot of feature writers fall into that category. And then there are people who are just more on the sort of creative side, which I am more so. I just have ideas, and, you know, ideas for characters, and ideas for shows, ideas for stories. And it's just a different way of working. And of course, you have to have both to some degree. But
I saw you in an interview about the Fairly OddParents, and you said that the great thing about that show was it was like a bucket that you could throw jokes into. And I think that meant, to me, that meant it had a very specific structure. So it was like already there, and you could just throw jokes in there and it wouldn't like break the bucket, you know?
It was a fun bucket.
It was basically a bucket of fun.
How many crazy fun ideas, smart ideas can you have and jam them into a single script? And Butch would just go, the more the better. He loved it, you know, because he had to do everything before I got there. And I remember an episode I did as an experiment in the second to last season I was there. At the second to last year I was at Nick, where I actually had 5 storylines in the first 4 pages. I had some seasoned, a couple of people that had written sitcoms and written hour television. They said, this is insane. And I said, I'm doing this to show you what you can do with this show.
You had 5 storylines for Fairly OddParents, which is like a 15-minute episode show.
12 and a half minutes.
12 and a half minutes.
And so we got to the record, right?
Yeah.
And everyone is on the floor laughing.
Yeah.
And the writers start laughing, everyone starts laughing. And I said, you have to look at the form. Yeah. You can't just come into situations knowing the way to do something. You have to look at the show, the story, the form. I've written interactive stuff. I've written 11-minute squash and strush stuff. I've written action movies. You have to respect the form, and then you have to milk the form for whatever you can do best with it. You know, that's part of the fun challenge of being a writer.
Okay, Fairly OddParents, basically, he had these fairy godparents who were goldfish. And then he would make a wish. There was a little kid. His parents were kind of like distracted. He had a babysitter. He would basically ask them, you know, I wish that I was older or whatever. And then it would happen and it would play out. And it would always be like a disaster. But that was basically the structure of it, right?
The structure of the show was, I always said it's a figurative and literal wish fulfillment fantasy for kids. You know, and basically, and the show had gotten, I'm not gonna say it's gotten stale, but it had gotten repetitive.
It was like seven seasons. How many seasons did that go?
Even more. But when I came in, I basically, with Butch's blessing, redeveloped the show. I took took the parents and took them from being kind of mean, comically so, to being clueless and adult children, which was everybody thought was funnier, including Butch. Yeah. And then I took characters that were super funny, and I put them in episodes together and figured out ways to do it. And then I also, basically I created new characters. Like when I went to go do the show, they had a baby fairy named Poof, who was a little round fairy. Mm-hmm. My daughter was a little kid at the time, but she's a genius. And I said to her, I need a new character. Yeah. I want to walk in with a new character. And she said, well, there's no baby anti-fairy who'd be an enemy to this character. So we created a character named Foop, which is Poof spelled backwards, who's a square baby with a villain with a pencil mustache and who's a monster.
Yeah.
And he's like an evil kid with little baby with an English accent. So yeah, I did new things, and Butch let me do it, and I had fun.
And Butch created the show, right?
Yeah, he did. He created the show, and he never really got his fair due at Nickelodeon, to be honest. I mean, he created the show, which was a hit with kids, and they gave him 6 episodes, 4 episodes, 10 episodes, and you know, he went back and forth, did other things. But when I came, you know, we got lucky. We had an executive, this guy named Rich Magianis, who fought very hard for the show, still a friend of mine, and he got SEMA and the people in New York to give a big pickup. And then we created a show called T.U.F.F, which starred Jerry Trainer, who was a kid star, which did really well on the network. And so as a result, we got a little more clout. And then at a time, I was overseeing both shows at the same time. So we delivered a script for T.U.F.F and a script for Fairly OddParents literally every week.
Oh, wow. So how did you, I want to ask you this too. When you go to pitch a show, how do you usually present a show like that? Like, do you just describe it? Do you have a book? Do you have a script?
No, you mean any show, or do you mean like
well,
that?
A show like, let's go with a show like that, like a kids show for Nickelodeon. Like if you were going to
right. Okay. Well, I think you just, I mean, what I do is I go in. Well, there's a state of mind that I think you need to get into first. And I say this because I pitched so many things from the time I was really a kid. I mean, I pitched when I was really young. I was in the room with network heads of movie studios, because my brother was already a big writer at the time, and you know, he didn't like pitching, so he let me do it all. And so, you know, but you know, these were serious dudes. You know, they were like people who ran companies. And what I learned after the first pitch, when I felt a little bit intimidated, because you know, I was in the room with somebody so powerful, I didn't like that feeling. So I decided that I would never go back and be intimidated again. And the way I did it was, I decided, I like this idea and I respect you, but I don't care if you buy it or not. I'm going to write it whether you buy it or not. Yeah. And what was interesting about that was, because it's not a belligerent sort of state of mind, it's a friendly, confident state of mind that's sort of positive about the idea. And what ended up happening was that sort of good feeling I had, the energy I had, sort of was infectious in the room. You know, people didn't feel like they were up against a writer. but they felt a little bit nervous that you were so confident in your idea, and they know they don't know anything because they don't. And so they start to say, ooh, he seems to really like this, and he seems to know what he's doing, and you're more inclined to sell something or to work with people. And on top of that, I'm malleable. So it's like, if you buy my idea, you tell me what you want to do with it, and I'll tell you pretty quickly the cause and effect of that, right? It's like, if you'd like to do that, it would do this. And then people start to see, ooh, we can toss ideas in, and this person's malleable with his ideas, and he's quick to tell you how it affects the idea. But you just go in and you just basically say, I love this idea. That's the first thing I always say.
It's so interesting because what you're saying is you go in there with the confidence that you've got a good product.
It has to be real.
But you also can't have a chip on your shoulder about it when they say, oh, we'd like that to be a woman, or we'd like that to be a or whatever. You can't be like, no, this is perfect the way it is. Yeah, you cannot be like that, but you have to be confident in it. Yeah.
Right, you're selling it. It's so someone's buying it.
Yeah.
If they're buying it, it's theirs.
It's theirs.
I mean, you just have to let's just be real. So at any rate, no, I go in, the first thing I always say is I tell them how much I love the idea and why.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll say, maybe a little bit intellectually why I love the idea. And then I just go into it and I'll say, okay, so there's, that, for instance, in the kids business, they talk about a couple of things. They talk about aspirational situations, which are something every kid would want, right? Mm-hmm. So if I were pitching Fairly OddParents, I would say, this is the ultimate aspirational kids cartoon. It's a figurative and literal wish fulfillment fantasy about a kid who's a normal kid. He's an average kid. He's not totally a train wreck, but he suffers all the same indignities and injustices that every kid, suffers, and that they feel they suffer. Now, if I was pitching it now, I would talk about fairness, because that's a big buzzword with kids now. And I would say, he gets these two fairies who will do anything for him. And of course, the comedy is he wishes for things, and after a very brief honeymoon period of the wish going well, it hits the fan, and he has to somehow fix it, and maybe learn something along the way, or maybe just has a good time.
So you're basically kind of pitching an engine. It says, this is what's going to happen, everything, and this is going to run the show, and we're going to.
That's right.
And be able to just keep coming up with stuff. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. It's very astute, because when you pitch shows, people will often say, well, it doesn't have to be high concept. In fact, we're looking for low concept shows. We're looking for shows that don't have an engine. Then if you pitch them a show that doesn't, they say, well, what drives the show every week? So you have to be aware of what drives the show, even if it's something just emotional. Like I wrote up a couple of shows for, I don't know if you're familiar with our daughter Olivia's work with her friend Sydney, but I wrote up a couple of shows for them in the last day, just to toss it out to them so they have more.
This is the Snapchat show. This is the Snapchat show. Yeah. Which is
But Olivia started winning. She started winning film festivals in 7th grade.
Oh, really?
She won her first film festival in 6th grade.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we showed a clip last week from it when we were interviewing Diane, and it was just, people just loved it.
She's a funny kid. She's a funny, talented kid. So yeah, but even in those sort of character driven shows, there needs to be an engine, one show basically is a show where the two of them go back to high school, sort of 21 Jump Street style. But what happens is, the second they're in this high school, which has stupid over the top crime in it, they're swept back into all the horrible injustices of high school and become vigilantes to right high school wrongs. So they ignore all the crimes and they sort of take care of the girl that's not invited to the dance. You know what I mean? In a really belligerent, over the top, psycho funny way. And it's like, you can see that, Jay. You go, okay, I get it. Yeah. I get what the show's about.
Do you ever, how do you generate creative ideas? Do you ever find yourself in writer's block, or are you?
No, because what happens is, and this, like what you do, you might hear something on the news and say, that would be an interesting kind of person to interview, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When you're a psychologist, you might see somebody do something crazy and say, well, that's interesting. I wonder why they do that.
Yeah.
As a writer, you have it all. You see things on the news. You see something do something crazy. Somebody do something crazy. You hear some crazy story and you go, that's kind of a funny idea.
Yeah. What ideas are like all around you. They're not necessarily just in your head.
Oh, no,
they're all around you. Yeah.
I think they're everywhere, and I think you take
That's
them
what
in.
I think when people get concerned about that kind of stuff is because they don't realize it's not just you, it's
No.
you in the world. There's just
Oh, yeah,
ideas everywhere.
And it's your relationship to the world, you know?
Yeah.
It can be your upbringing, it can be your parents, it can be any experience you had that you want to put a spin on, you know, but it can also just be the things you see, you know, writers, and I think creative people, and I honestly think everybody's a creative person.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that they're sponges, you know, they're fascinated with that. And for me, I'm personally fascinated with psychology and people. I'm going to go back to school, and two things I'm going to do next to my life is I'm going to consult for people and help them creatively, you know, professionally.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I'm going to help people psychologically because I've studied a lot of psychology.
This makes so much sense.
Yeah,
but see, you can't really help people artistically if you can't help them psychologically, because I think that's 90% of the game is getting your head right. It's like sports. You got to get your head right.
5% of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm fascinated by people. My mother was fascinated by people. And when I was little, she would take me out with her and we would go to lunch and she would say, I wonder who those people are. Do you think that's the secretary and someone else's husband? What? And I started to go, that's interesting. Who are people? What, you know, what makes that person tick? What makes this person tick?
Yeah.
And then I studied a bunch of psychology. I was in graduate school studying family systems for about a year. And then I had to stop because I was just doing too much work to keep going, and I'm going to go back. And I figured out how families work and how complicated they are and how what prisons they can be, but what springboards to freedom they can be, and how powerful family dynamics are. And I learned all about, you know, a little more about individual psychology and why people do what they do and what makes a narcissist, and, you know, and it's never what's on the surface. You know what I mean? It's an angry person is a person that doesn't like themselves. Yeah. A greedy person is a person who has no confidence. There's always a layer of something underneath the outward, you know, sort of actions of a person, and so that really helps with writing, you know. So sure.
I think as a writer, you probably either have to know something about psychology, or you have to know something, or you have to be an actor, which is somebody who studies psychology as it is, to come at it like that.
Or just have instincts. You know, a lot of people I found, you know, they write one thing. You know, like they have something they do and they do it forever. For me, because I've written so many different kinds of things, I really need sort of a broad perspective. You know, it's not like, you know, even those big time creators, right? Yeah. They make one show and then that's what they do, you know, and like, you know.
It's amazing that the amount of work that you've cranked out in your life and the amount of creativity that you've had for decades and decades and decades in different genres. Yeah. Because I know a lot of writers, and a lot of times writers can get very myopic on what they do. And they can get also very myopic on the structure and the way they structure things, because they kind of have to have something to grab onto, but sometimes they grab too hard. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it really is a difficult thing to do. And the thing is that, you know, we talked about this last time we just talked personally, you know, over the years, when I had to develop a really bulletproof sort of creative process so I wouldn't get burned out. And it happened when I was working on a show for the show I sold from the screensaver. The very mean people at Saban said to me at the time, they said, you need to write 80 final drafts in a year.
Wow.
And I said, that's impossible. So I went to a therapist, and he basically said to me, you just need complete autonomy from their needs. And that'll at least open the door for you. Yeah. And I said, that's interesting. And I already was a fairly autonomous person. Yeah. So I'm going to try that. And the second I stopped caring, I didn't stop caring if the work got done. I stopped worrying about them being mad or what they thought of it. The second that was out of my head, I suddenly had like 60% more energy. And what I did was I just started putting together the pieces of this sort of creative process over the year, which I've now taught to a bunch of kids. And I told you this before, it's confidence. Yeah. And the way you get it is basically you look at everything in your whole life that you didn't think you could do that you did. You pulled off, and you write a list of it. Doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. Doesn't matter whether you got a date with somebody you didn't think you could date, you passed the class, you didn't think it doesn't matter. You make a list. So you start saying, oh, I can do things I don't think I can do. I have a history of that. Intensity, which has to go out on what you're doing and never back in on you because it shuts you down. You have to have some fun. You have to have fun with creativity. And I think with everything to some degree, even if it's acerbic fun, you know, then there's autonomy, which really is split into two things. It's like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about what other people think of me or this. And I'm not going to worry about what I get from it. I'm not doing it to get something. I'm doing it to give to it.
You said something really interesting in that interview that I watched where you said old people, they are always looking for what they get out of it. And young people are always looking for something else. I forget what you said.
Well, I think when people start out, they're worried what people are going to think, right? Yeah. And when people have gotten some work, it's all about what's in this for me. What's in this for me? What am I going to get? Am I getting enough? Are they giving me enough? You know? And that's poison. It's equal parts poison. And then finally, I think you have to do the thing that I think is very hard for really smart people to do. And it's, you have to be optimistic. You have to sit for 10 seconds.
Because all of those things come into your head of like, oh, this bad thing could happen and that bad thing could happen.
Go through the checklist. You go through the checklist. By the time you get through the first group, you just sit for a second, and all you need to do to be optimistic is for 10 seconds, you randomly and vaguely picture the situation you're in working out great for you and everyone else. You picture yourself happy and everyone else happy. You don't do any details at all in your head. And then you just start to write. Or you start to do whatever. You go to a meeting, you go on a date. It works for everything. And what I learned afterwards, after I built this up, I've never been burned out. You know, really? I've written, I think at Nickelodeon, well, in the last 10 years, I've been, I think I've overseen Broken the Stories for 700 episodes of animation. And you know, and so it's like, it's insane. I know now even I recognize it as insane. But the thing is that, you know, if you're in the right state of mind, you know, what's burning you out isn't the work. What's burning you out is you. See, you and your head's burning you out.
I think that's the thing that makes you tired. Yeah. Is all that battling with all that negativity that comes into your head. I find that there are certain times of day where that comes in stronger than other times of day.
Yes.
So I have to be like wary of that, and I have to have tools to kind of get myself out of it.
Yeah, you really do. You really do. And the thing is that one of the what I learned in after the fact was that what I was really doing was a form of like Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
It was really but I just broken it all down. And then on top of it, I learned to meditate. I did TM, and you know, I can't say anything about TM here because, you know, they may sue me or something. But I don't know about the TM structure of the organization. But I can tell you this: the meditation is pure genius because you don't think, and it's not guided, and you're not focused on breathing. You're repeating a nonsense word in your head that they say is Sanskrit, and you're repeating in your head, and you go away. Wow. So you go away. You go away no matter how badly you do it, no matter how well you do it. Really? You go away 3 times in 18 minutes.
I have never done that transcendental meditation. I meditate every day, but I don't have experience with that. I have to try it.
I would say it's incomparably better.
Really?
Than anything I've done. Yeah, no, because it's very simple. It's not mystical. Yeah. No. It's if you're repeating a word in the back of your head that isn't a word, your brain will drift off.
Do you think you could do that with just any nonsensical word? Or do you have to get the one, pay the money and get the one that they want?
The word may subconsciously have meaning to you.
Really?
Well, yeah, if the word has any meaning to you, like let's say you said, I'm going to do Coca-Cola. You might start thinking about Coca-Cola. The words they give you mean
don't
nothing
have any meaning at all.
They're sounds.
Oh, okay.
You know, they're like woo-ha, you know, they're like a sound. And so at any rate, that's actually pretty amazing. And what happened was I was surfing one day I would go surfing when I'd be really tense. I was, you know, raising 2 kids and mostly supporting a family, you know, in this crazy business I'm in with people getting fired every day. When I was at Nickelodeon, every night they'd fire a whole new group of people because Viacom was having trouble. They used to call it the Orange Wedding every Friday night, referencing the Red Wedding on Game of Thrones. And you know, I'm you know, you got to keep yourself going. You got to be a focused dad. You got to be together. You can't be broken. You got to turn out huge amounts of work.
Did they call it the Orange Wedding because Nickelodeon's an orange building or something?
Yeah, because their color is orange. Yeah,
their color is orange.
So I would be surfing, and I'd go and I'd be really, you know, tense, and I get 1 10-second wave, and I'd feel completely better.
Really?
I'd be elated, and I said, "What's going on there?" And I realized I just shut off my mind. You can't shut off your mind when you sleep because you have, you know, dreams about the things that are troubling you psychologically.
Yeah, I had a dream last night about Seth Rogen.
Yeah, there's no way to shut your mind off.
Yeah.
But an activity that completely takes your focus does it. And like if you're looking at a wave that's changing under your feet the whole time, that'll do it. Yeah. Golf does it for some people because of the intense focus of hitting the ball right. Yeah. But if you do the, you know, the TM of meditation,
Oh.
17, 18 minutes goes by and it's like you've been on a psychological vacation.
Wow. That is, the more people I talk to, the more creative people I talk to, the more they talk about meditation.
It centers you. You're in the moment, and you got to be in the moment. If you're in the past, if you're thinking about the past, you're in the past. If you're thinking about the future, you're usually worried about something that's going to happen. If you're in the past, you're regretful maybe of something that's going to happen, or you wish was happening now and isn't. Mm-hmm. And both things take you out of the present, which is the only place you're really alive and connected, the only place you're really available to yourself and other people, and the only place you can really fully create because you're there, Did
you discover this with your family? Did you teach your family this? Did your family teach you this? How is it as a family growing as artists? I know Diane and I talked about this for a while, but it seems like you guys have the right formula over there.
Well, it's interesting. It's once again, it's a lot of things at once. My son's very naturally Zen and centered. And I realized Olivia's more like all over the place and like me. She's just bing, bong, bing, bong. Yeah. And Diane's in her own world in another separate, wonderful way. Yeah. But Nick was very centered. And I knew, you can't tell, I adore my kids. Yeah. And so to connect to Nick, I had to be centered. Mm-hmm. Like, you couldn't do small talk with Nick. So I went, okay, this is where I got to be. Then what happened was, like I say, I figured out through surfing, sort of a way to be connected a different way. And then Diane was really instrumental in my creative process because she's a person who just does things. And I was a person who would overthink them for too long and take them apart before I did them.
My wife's like that too. She just does things. I'm like, what are you doing? And then she's like,
and it's great.
Cuts the chase.
And I learned to just do things from her. And then I figured out my own creative process really as a vehicle to survive. It was like, well, I'm not going to be miserable. So that's just it.
Yeah.
That's not happening. I'm not going to take the only one and only life I know I have for sure and be unhappy. That's not happening. Yeah. So if I'm going to do this job, I'm going to find a way to do it as happily as I can. Yeah. And there's a lot of goodwill that goes towards the job. There's, helping people makes me feel good. Taking care of my family made me feel good. But then you have to be in a certain headspace to take the constant grind of the job. And so I built it up that way, and then that's the way it was just like it was a way to fix a problem. It was like, well, if I'm going to do this at this volume of work for untold years, I really got to find a way to overcome the sort of bitter writer syndrome and burnout that people naturally get.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. I think that is a good place for us to end. I don't want your battery to run out over there. And I also think that it's a very positive thing for us to end on.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being here. This is Ray DeLaurentis. He is a font of creativity and also an inspiration for a lot of people. And thank you for sitting down with us today. And go forth and prosper.
Thank you. I hope I made some sense.
All right. Yeah, well, you definitely made sense. Okay. I appreciate it. All right.
All right, Joel. Thanks for having me on, man.
Wow. That was pretty heavy stuff. Really, really useful, important information. Thanks, Ray, for being on the program. It's something I think all of us can use. Wow, a lot to think about. Got to do that meditation. Seems to be the thing to do. I'm going to end the show now. I'm really fortunate. We're really fortunate. Alessandra, a friend of mine, Italian friend of mine, and Giovanni Baglioni, who's a virtuoso guitar player. Alessandra Cosimato. I don't know why I can't pronounce it. But anyway, here they are singing a George Harrison song that you all love.
I look at you all, I see the love there that's sleeping, while my guitar gently weeps. And I look at this floor and I see it needs sweeping. Still my guitar gently I don't know why. Nobody told you how to unfold your love. I don't know how someone controlled you. They broke and then they sold you. But when I look at this world and I notice it's turning